Hello, welcome back. So, before we begin assembling our model, first let us do a few edits. But before that, be sure to save your rubber piston as rubber piston. Okay, so I'll go back to main barrel, and I don't like how thick the finger flans is. So what we can do is let us edit the thickness. So go to your timeline and find the extrusion that connects to the finger flange. Note that the extrusion will be highlighted. So in this case, it will be this one. Double click. Then I will set it to -2 instead. There we go. So that looks a lot better. And now I noticed that it is a bit sharp. So that is not very nice when using the syringe. So I will add a fillet to the edges. So on modify, click on fillet. We also have chamfer, which is not as smooth as fillet. And I will select the edges of the finger flange. And I will fillet it by 0.5 mm. Click OK. And now our main barrel is looking much nicer. Okay, so I will save this. So Control S and OK. And notice that the version number went up to version 2 compared to version 1 from before. In this case, it's actually version 3 since I have saved this in the past. Okay, now let us proceed to the assembly. So click on Assemble or Add to Assembly and click on New Assembly. This will create a new file where our syringe will be. So in this case, we want to make sure that ground to parent is turned on, and we can set the initial position to be as is. So click on OK, but I'll show you what happens if ground to parent is turned off. If that is turned off, our main barrel will be able to be dragged freely, but we don't want that. So of course, what we want to do is right click on main barrel and click ground to parent. I will click on this and look, and now we won't be able to drag the main barrel around. Okay. First, before we add the other components, we have to save the file. So I will save this as syringe assembly. Alright. There we go. And click on save. Now we can introduce the other parts. So for the plunger rod, I will click on assemble, add to assembly, existing assembly, and I will click on syringe assembly. Do the same thing with the rubber piston. So rubber piston, add to assembly, existing assembly, syringe assembly. Insert. Now that we have everything inserted, we can now move it around since they are not grounded to parent. And now we will begin assembly. So first, in assembly, we have what we call relationships. So relationships, we have constraint components and joints. So we will use both of them. So constraint components is similar to constraining in sketches, except it's using 3D objects. So earlier, we were calling the parts of our object the bodies, and now they're called parts. Okay. So here, it's called a body, right? But now, in the assembly, it is called a part. And we can connect these parts together in order to create an assembly. So first, I want, of course, these two to be connected. So I will click on constraint components. So we have 4 types of constraint. We have align, angle, center, and tangent. In this case, we want them to be aligned. So I will select the outer edge of this plunger, and I will select the inner edge. So make sure that the edge you select correspond to each other. So what happens is that when I select those 2 edges, they connect edge to edge. So if I click OK, What happens is now if I drag this around, they will now drag around connected. So for example, let us change it from edge to edge. So I will get rid of these two. And what if wait, I'll delete this first. Okay. I will create another relationship. But I will select the face instead. What happens is it creates a face-to-face constraint. So I can also flip it around. But a face-to-face constraint allows the object to have 2 degrees of freedom, or actually 3 degrees of freedom, which is this way, that way, and up and down. But as you can see, this is not what we want. We don't want a sliding relationship. We want them to be completely constrained. So in this case, we have to select the 2 edges. So I will click on constrain again. This time, let me select the outer edge. So this part and this part. And as you can see, edge to edge, they will constrain to each other. Okay. The next part of our syringe is we want this to slide in and out. To do that, instead of a constraint relationship, we will create a joint by clicking on relationships, then joint, or the letter J. So click on joint, and first we will select our motion type. So the motion type that we want is a slider. So a slider allows the object to slide. It can also be cylindrical, because in real life, technically a syringe has a cylindrical constraint. But in this case, we only want it to be a slider. Then click on position. Now notice we can now select between two points. What we want to do is to select 2 parts of our components that will match up. In this case, we want the center, the snap point, or the center of our rubber piston. So we will select the upper part. Oopsies. Again. There we go. To the entrance of our main barrel. So, if I click OK, as you can notice, I can now drag this up and down. And we have essentially completed our syringe. But I have made a tiny error. Notice that our rubber piston is too big compared to the main barrel. So let us edit that in our settings. So this is why it's called parametric modeling. It's because we can edit the parameters of our model to make sure that they fit together. In this case, we can even include variables in our model to ensure that the model fits together perfectly. So in this case, we want the inner diameter, which is only 6. So I will set this as 6 mm. But notice that it will fail to solve it because this dimension is larger than 6. So first, I will shrink this down to 5.5. Then I will set this to 6 mm. Okay, there we go. Now this should fit perfectly. Finish sketch. I will also edit the plunger rod. So I'll double click the sketch. I will set this to 5.5 and 5. So this should be 5. And this should be 5.5. Finish sketch. There we go. So now, if I save these two, so save both your plunger rod and rubber piston. Go back to the assembly and notice that it hasn't updated yet. So it's given me a warning that 2 references are out of date. So to update them, I go to the top left and I click on the chain. And what happens is that it will automatically update. And now, as you can see, the rubber piston now fits perfectly inside our tube. There we go. Lastly, of course, we don't want it to escape the syringe. So we can actually just limit that temporarily in Fusion. So what we can do is double click our joint, our slider joint, and we can set our distances. So to do so, go to motion, click on minimum and maximum. Not sure. There we go. Turn on minimum and maximum. Okay. Then we drag these to the minimum point. Okay. Which is around here. Then our maximum point, we will drag this down all the way to the bottom. Oh, too much. So around over here. So 0 to 62. Click, we can preview the limits. So it will just move up and down. Click on OK. And now, our syringe is complete. So yay! So on the next video, I will show you how to give it materials and how to render our syringe. See you!